This is the DRF Players Podcast. Here are your hosts, Peter Thomas Fornatel and Jonathan Kinchin.
Oh, yeah, and on that note, we begin another edition of the DRF Players Podcast. Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatel, back with you, not in the bunker, back upstairs. Not a whole lot of people running around here today, so I can avoid the freezing cold of the basement. I'm hoping I can be back down in my regular office by about April or May, but, you know, we'll see. We'll see with the way this weather's been going. It's not a certainty by any means. Going to have a fun show for you over the course of the next hour. It is show 302, the Friday, January 19th, 2018 edition of the DRF Players Podcast. I'll be joined in short order by my co-host, but he has some sob story where I needed to kill a minute before we brought him in at the beginning of the show today, but he'll be here with us soon. We're going to be talking about tournaments a lot today. In the early days of the DRF Players Podcast, we did a lot of tournament talk. We had a lot of players on. We talked a lot of strategy. As the show has evolved, we still get to the tournament talk once in a while, but more often it's become more of a general racing show. But with these three huge tournaments coming up over the course of the next few weekends, and for those who've been living under a rock, we have, not this weekend, but next weekend, the Pegasus Betting Challenge, one of the best opportunities in the history of contests. This is a format the tournament players have been saying they wanted since the very beginning of tournaments, where the prize pool is not provided by players in the form of an entry fee, but it's provided in the form of money put up by the host track. In this case, Stronach Group and ExpressBet, each putting up $100,000 to fund the prize pool. Players put up $12,000, but all of that money acts as a live bankroll. Going to be very interesting. I want to talk to our co-host when he finally arrives, if he'll be playing in that event. But then following that event, that's really just the beginning, because the following weekend is the World Championship of Handicapping. We're going to be talking about that extensively later in the show, so I won't go into it in great depth here. And then the weekend after that, out in Las Vegas, National Horse Players Championship. JK will be among those playing. I will be out there helping out our friend Steve Bick with his special broadcasts of at the races that he does during the NHC, and I'll be talking about the next year's qualifying situation for the World Championship of Handicapping, which will be kicking off. But first, let's introduce this co-host who I've been referring to throughout the preamble. He's back on the planet Texas. He's the people's champ, Jonathan Kinchin. How are you?
What's going on? What's going on? I am here. Everyone obviously wanted to get in the elevator at the same time I did, so it slowed me down about a minute and 12 seconds, but I am in the building.
It was okay. I kind of wanted to give the preamble today about how this show is going to be a little more tournament-centric than many of ours. We will later in the show get to talking at least briefly about the late pick 4 at Santa Anita on Saturday, but we did have several listener questions, and I have a couple of notes of things that I want, that they've just been, I keep notes for the shows, I've tweeted them at times, and it just looks like this crazy chicken scratch, and then from one show to another, I'll carry over a story that doesn't get told. But there are two stories from 2017, well, actually one from 2017, one from early 2018, that I have been on the show list for weeks, that I want to clear the decks and get those started. But before we do that, JK, I just want to get like the update from you. What's good? What's been going on? You're back in Texas. What are your travel plans coming up?
Yeah, I'm back in Texas. It's a little bit chilly here. I'll be heading to South Florida on Wednesday, I believe. Thursday morning is our first Players Committee, the Wagering Committee meeting down in South Florida with the Breeders' Cup people. So myself, Joe Applebaum, Paul Matisse, and Tom Quigley will be joining Craig Burnick, Mike Rogers, and the rest of the guys at Breeders' Cup. So looking forward to that, getting some things accomplished, resolved, and with the rules for the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge, but also discussing some new ideas for some other wagering opportunities. So that should be fun. Looking forward to that. And then the party shall commence with the long-time friend and business partner for the Pegasus. So it's good to have him back in the racing mix. So it should be fun. Looking forward to it.
All right, that's cool. Several things I wanted to pause on there. You're a little herky-jerky there with your dodgy library Wi-Fi, JK. I don't know if there's anything you can do. Hopefully it'll settle in and be okay. We lost a few words there, but you mentioned about the Breeders' Cup. I hope you guys are going to be strapping on your boots. You make it sound easy. Oh, resolving this. It's you guys are in a bit of a quagmire there. Have you had any preliminary conversations? I know you can't talk specifics, but have you had any preliminary conversations with the gang? Are you feeling optimistic about your ability to put forth some new rules for the Breeders' Cup betting challenge that are going to make everybody feel like they're competing on a level playing field?
We've had some conversations. So just some conversations preliminarily, obviously, to go in with some ideas in hand, and we feel good about some of the ideas we have, and it'll be interesting to get the guys from Breeders' Cup feedback.
Okay, well, obviously when those rules eventually get published, we can talk about them and you can maybe share some of the thought process of what went into them. I wish you guys, and I don't mean this, sometimes when you say, in racing, very often one of the meanest things you could say is good luck when you say it with that obnoxious tone that I just did. And I don't mean it like that. But this is a situation where I'll say sincerely to you and the gang, I really wish you the best of luck. It's important work that you're doing, and hopefully that can work out. And then the next thing I wanted to ask you, there's been a lot of chatter on Twitter in the last few days about added Breeders' Cup races potentially. And I wanted to ask you, is this the type of thing that you think might be in the purview of you and the group? And if maybe you're not even at liberty to talk about it at this stage, but I was just curious to pick your brain on it because I had some thoughts myself.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I would think that topic's going to be more of a breeder, owner, operator question. I would imagine their influence and their thoughts would probably be a little bit more important as that 14th Breeders' Cup race might be coming. However, hopefully they'll ask us a little bit. But I think in all honesty, and I'm fine with the idea. I think a 14th race probably is going to affect the nominations and all of that stuff more than it's going to affect our wagering dollar, in my honest opinion. However, I'd love to be involved in the conversation. But there's only a couple real ways you can go with that, right? I mean, there's only a few different directions that you can do. They've gotten every category for the most part covered.
Yeah, I mean, it just feels like the danger of diluting it and creating something that's less appealing for the horse player is possible if it was done in a herky-jerky way or if it was done too aggressively. But I could also see a situation where a race was introduced right and a division were set up, hopefully a division that would also have international interest for the obvious added appeal of involving more owners, breeders, trainers, horsemen around the world. I think there's probably a smart way to introduce something. I just hope it's not going to be like, okay, yeah, here's 3 new races that we're just going to call Breeders' Cup races right from the jump. I just feel like it dilutes a product that's already diluted,
Wouldn't it be a juvenile turf sprint? I mean, while we're on the topic, I mean, isn't that
my mind
the
went
one
there?
That's probably is going to involve the most outside influence? I don't think you want to do a juvenile dirt sprint. I feel like that would take away from the I think a little bit from the two-turn races. And think about it. I mean, we almost lost Beholder a few years ago to that race. I don't know if a lot of people remember, but she was entered there, expected to run in the juvenile dirt sprint, and ended up surprisingly enough going in the two-turn race, and then she wins it, and she turns out to be one of the best two-turn mares we've ever seen. So I think the juvenile turf situation would involve more European participation and open up the doors a little bit for some more participation on that side of the world.
I agree. And what I like about that race is I don't see it hurting those other races, which are, typically full, oversubscribed. I don't see it. What I don't like is when a new Breeders' Cup race hurts an existing Breeders' Cup race. And I'll spare you to go all the rant on the dirt mile. You can just find an old clip of me going off on it if you feel like hearing me rant and rave for a little bit. But to me, that's the perfect example of what I don't want to see. I saw somebody on Twitter saying they wanted a race at 1.1 miles on the dirt too. And I'll just tell you right now that's the opposite of the way I look at it. The idea isn't, for bettors, to me, it's like the death of the event to have it tailored where every horse has exactly what they want to do, and you have a bunch of 8-horse fields with dominant favorites. I think it's interesting when connections have to make a decision, and I think it's important. I think the races that we really end up caring about are the races that have a division built around them. You can't just make something up like the marathon when they don't run 2-mile dirt races and then just make it a Breeders' Cup race and take if we build it, they will come approach. To me, that's not the right way to do it. Having a little more forethought and trying to build a division and come up with races that make sense and fit into the existing framework in a way that's not going to diminish what we already have. And, I'm also not opposed to the idea of having a half measure where you have a stake race with a sizable purse that might attract people to come over, but you don't necessarily call it a nominal Breeders' Cup race right from the jump. Is another idea that occurred to me. What do you think of my, am I being all get off my lawn here, or do you think there's something to what I'm saying?
Well, it's kind of what they did this year, right? I mean, the horse, I believe it was a Coolmore horse, or at least it wasn't Coolmore, it was Godolphin. It was blue. I don't remember which color blue. That won the juvenile.
It was either the
race.
Yankees. It was either the Yankees or the Red Sox. One of those teams. There's no real difference.
No, I think it was Coolmore. I really do. I'm not 100% sure, but so I got a question though, Pete. What outside of the juvenile turf sprint and a juvenile dirt sprint, I mean, where else could they really go?
What could you do?
I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I'm just trying.
No, I mean, I don't think you should go anywhere. I don't think you should go anywhere, but you could do let's see. They already have a filly and mare sprint. It would have to do probably with other races for you'd look to divide by sex, I guess, right? So what would be where would the glaring hole? Not that there would be a glaring hole, but if you wanted to make up a race, to what would it be?
I guess the first place to start, and there's no way they'd ever do it, and I don't think it was a good idea, so don't shoot the messenger, would be a filly division of the mile, the turf mile. They'll never do that.
Yeah, it's terrible.
I'm just saying that's one that they could split.
Yeah.
To
me, you could run that race. That's a perfect example of a race you could run that should be nowhere near the prestige, because we see how obviously the fillies compete toe-to-toe with the weight allowance, but compete toe-to-toe with the Colts. And that'd be a perfect example of a race that would dilute and make the event.
Yeah, I mean, 4 of the last 10 are female, correct? I mean, Tepin and then Goldacova 3 times, and that would be awful. I don't think they would do that. I think that if you did the turf, the 1.5 mile turf, you've already kind of got that with the filly and mare turf, so there's no reason to split that.
And that seems to have worked pretty well, I have to say. I mean, I suppose the turf would be stronger without the filly and mare turf, but for some reason that one doesn't bother me. I don't know why. It's not really logical, but just in my gut, it doesn't bother me to have that split out. I feel like the prestige difference is still enough that you get the horses that are supposed to be running in the turf running in the turf most of the time.
Right, of course. So I mean, I think it has to be the juvenile situation.
Yeah, juvenile sprint on turf is interesting. I don't like the idea of a juvenile sprint on dirt.
No, and they're both oversubscribed all the time. Those fields always have 14. So, and there's always, horses that are on the also eligible. So it's not like you're going to really affect the outcome. And in fact, you even kind of make it easier, right? Because I think one of the worst handicapping puzzles that you have to solve during the Breeders' Cup is whether or not these horses that have been running 6 furlongs in Europe are going to stretch out. So it's like I'm almost okay with that. And I'm okay with them being able to go in that other spot.
I agree with what you're saying, but selfishly, here's one reason I don't like it. That's one thing I feel like I've been able to do more or less pretty well over the years is identify which of those horses, even ones with decent form, aren't going to stay. So I like having those Euros in there because they'll draw money and presumably give me a better price on the Euro that I want to bet. Now, hey, it doesn't always work out. You get some trips like this year in the juvenile turf, and of course a bad opinion too against the winner. But putting that aside, selfishly that wouldn't help me in my pocketbook. But there's a logic to it, and I don't think it would hurt the race. So I don't know. If you get a say, why don't you go and? I mean, I'm sure this has been well thought through by people with many more stripes on their arms than us. But I think that's advice worth passing along if you get the ear of any sympathetic folks when you're having this Breeders' Cup meeting next week.
I'll try my hardest, Pete. I'll stand up in the middle of it and slam my hand down on the table and say, "Damn it, that's what Pete Fornatale wants." You think they'll kick me out?
You're done. If you say that, you'll be kicked off the committee. You might not be allowed to attend a Breeders' Cup in the future. But the plus side is then your name will be mud like mine, so we can just go slum it at the bar 2 blocks down from wherever the Breeders' Cup is being held and bet on our phones.
There we go.
Let's move through this list of stories, etc. Speaking of the Breeders' Cup, this is one from the last Breeders' Cup. And it's just a ridiculous story, but I've been meaning to tell it, and I'm just going to do it. We were at the Breeders' Cup. We were having fun. We were also quasi-working. I filmed a bunch of stuff with producer Craig that folks have hopefully seen as little interstitial bumper ads during DRF Live, DRF TV programming. You filmed a few things. And I think it was at the end of the day on Friday. And we got word from producer Craig, and basically when producer Craig says jump, we say how high. So the man's word is gold. You don't mess with guys who win Eclipse Awards, And he was looking for one of us to come on at the end of the day and recap the races, sort of talk about the main storylines, et cetera, et cetera. I was booked for that event down at Powerhouse Park with Mike Watchmaker. So I wasn't going to be able to stick around to wrap up. And then at some point, somebody in the group, and I really sincerely wish I could remember who it was, we were talking about plans, and specifically somebody was like, what's looking for what to do. And of course, the party follows Jonathan. So the idea was, where's Jonathan going to be after the races? I want to go there, that type of thing. That's the kind of social influence you have in these degenerate circles, JK. And I said, well, he's got to go shoot this rap video. And then, I'm sure he's going to go to, the Brigantine or whatever it was. And the phrase stuck in the craw of the person asking the question, the rap video. Wait a second. I knew his brother was a world famous house DJ, but I had no idea JK got rhymes.
Rhymes for days.
But then when I told you the story, it turned out you actually do have some experience in this area. I wish we had the audio clip. We'll have to save that for a future show. But tell the story.
A little backstory on that. First of all, the song would be hard to play on here, right? Because it's got explicit lyrics.
Let
me tell you what happened.
Don't insult producer Craig. He can bleep a few. He can turn that in. He can turn that around, no problem.
We were in college. It was a spring break. We went and hung out at my brother's house, and he has a studio in his house. It was me and 3 of my friends. Friend Will Matthews, who's still a musician, and Will is a kind of singer guitar guy. He played football at the University of Texas. My good friend Kojo and my good friend Dan, all hip hop fans, and we were hanging out. Having some adult beverages. We were tired of going out, probably didn't have any money at that point. We were in college, and we decided to take one of my brother's unused tracks that he just kind of had buried in a file that we liked, and to write a song to it. And so we wrote a song, we recorded it in his bathroom.
JK's breaking up on us. Hey, JK, are you there? Are you there? I don't want you to cut out in the middle of this. I don't want you to.
Don't take considering the circumstances, and none of us are rappers.
JK,
considering the circumstances.
Hey, can you hear me?
I am.
All right, you're. This is no bueno.
Actually,
the South Austin Library is out as a podcast recording location. By the way, we got to the story. You're in. Let's make sure you're reattached before I get you back going on the story. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
You are back. Okay. So we got to the point where you're with your pals. You got the unused track. You're heading to your brother's bathroom to record.
And we record the song in the bathroom, and it actually is not that bad, considering that none of us are really that talented, except for obviously my buddy Will, who actually is. But it's not bad. It's okay. It's kind of silly, but it was fun. The name of the song was "We're in Cali, Man." That was the hook.
That is so perfect. Perhaps a live rendition the next time we do a podcast after dark down in the dungeon. What do you say?
Absolutely, we could try that. No doubt.
All right, producer Craig, get ready. If he does that on us again, we might just have to kick him off, and you and I will riff the rest of the show. I don't know what's going on. I feel like we've done this setup before, Jonathan, and it's worked better than this. I don't know what's going on with the Wi-Fi.
Yeah, I'm not even on the Wi-Fi. I'm just on the cell, which I've done many times. So
you must just be the spot you're in. But anyway, anything you can do to improve it, please consider. All right. So anyway, there's the JK Got Rhymes story. I should have just lied and made it Eric Bialik in the story. I think he would have appreciated that. It sounds like something he might have said, but he wasn't there at the Breeders' Cup, so I knew it wasn't him. And then I considered making it Chick Matisse, but that seemed somehow anachronistic. That the Harry Chapin fan would be so up on the hip hop lingo. But anyway, this was a question I've been meaning to ask you on air or off, and I haven't done it yet. So we'll just do it. We'll just do it here, and it has to do with football. When you were a football coach, JK, what was your what were some of the what was your unit that you work with mostly?
It was offense, and it was receivers. So
receivers coach.
Yeah, so offense and receivers. Yep.
Okay, I just wanted to get your take, and I know it's been discussed to death in sports media, but I've avoided it mostly. I was watching the Saints-Vikings game, obviously on Sunday, like the rest of the country was. Funny enough, Perrin took an interest in the game. I think she liked the purple uniforms of the Vikings. When I'm watching football, she'll always come over and be like, "Which team are we rooting for?" Meaning like which color team. And I've been teaching her how to read the basics of the crawl on the bottom of the screen so she can read the score of the game and that kind of jazz. So she's taken a little bit of an interest in football. In this game, she decided that she wanted the purple team to win. And then at the end of the game, for whatever reason, started getting like a little bit attached. And so during that last sequence, it was I have a big echo now. Gosh, we have lovely sound situation on today's show. And it's gone. And I was just trying to explain. I was trying to let her down easy as the odds of, at the start of that drive, they had whatever they had, probably only a 10 or 15% chance to win the game, even at the start of that drive. And by the time they got to fourth down, I put their chances at about 1 in 50. So I was just trying to tell her, it's cool that you want them to win, and it's still physically possible that they could win, but, don't get your hopes up kind of thing. If somebody would give me 1 to 10 on the other side, I would be betting every penny I could get my hands on at this point. Anyway, we all saw the play. Crazy, improbable touchdown. Perrin was psyched. She ran around the house collecting high fives from me and Susan. She's excited to watch the game coming up this weekend. All very good. Of course, we watched the replay. I just never seen, and I hate to beat the guy up when I'm sure he's been pilloried all week, but I've never seen anything like what happened with Marcus Williams, the Saints safety on the play. And I was just curious if there was anything you could draw on in your coaching experience that made that anything other than a gaffe of the absolute highest order.
Oh, well, no, I actually have a pretty strong opinion about it. I think it's two things, and you can call whichever one you want to be the most prominent in the reason why. Two things. One is media and the internet and social media have made the big hit very much more, of a goal of defensive players. They're looking for that big shot, that really big, bang shot that's going to get played on SportsCenter's top 10. And unfortunately, when you wrap up and you tackle someone, you don't usually get those sexy shots. It's the ones where you kind of launch your body and that. So I think that's part of it. So I think that's kind of ruined a little bit of the game when it comes to tackling.
Yes.
The other thing is the other thing is that the way in which the defensive players have gotten their hands tied behind their back, no pun intended, with just kind of the ridiculous rules in terms of roughing receivers and all of that stuff. I heard in an interview that he felt as if he got there too early, and he kind of did. And so he kind of pulled himself up because he didn't want to get a penalty. When in hindsight, obviously, he would go back and take the 15-yard penalty right now and be done with it. And I think it was a combination of both of those things. He was trying to avoid getting kind of that penalty for unnecessary roughness, hitting a defenseless receiver, and a little bit of just kind of those habits of not wrapping up and tackling. And so I think those are the two reasons why that situation happened.
So it wasn't like did you think it was do you think that, like, I get that that's what's behind it, but does it seem, are you surprised? I mean, are you as shocked as I was seeing it? I mean, does it still
no, it's shocking. You're right. I mean, if you're a Saints fan, it's horrifying. Our friend Dan Kovaleski, I don't know if you saw this, but he tweeted an ad that he saw up in Minnesota that said, like, if you made any promises in the last 10 seconds, we have mass at these times on Sunday, essentially saying that, like, all these people in Minnesota are like, please, God, I'll do anything if you let us win. I thought it was really funny. It was a purple ad with a Vikings logo. So, I mean, look, it's crazy. I've seen stuff like that before, kind of crazy finishes, and that's one of the craziest I've seen. It's a little bit unfortunate. The Saints probably deserved to win at the end of the day. And I actually think the Saints probably had the best chance of beating Tom Brady in the Super Bowl. So it's too bad that it's not going to work that way.
We'll do a little bit more football chatter in advance of the Super Bowl. Always fun. Be fun to do something with Matt Bernier, too, if we can arrange for something like that. But anyway, yeah, I just wanted to get your take on it because I was dumbfounded. Producer Craig points out that the Vikings' edge potentially in a Super Bowl matchup against the Pats would be that they'd be playing at home. Who knows? That could certainly be worth something.
But here's the topic on that I think applies to racing. And I've heard it come up in a couple of conversations recently, is that if that were to be the case, from a wagering standpoint, if you happen to find yourself in Vegas where it's legal, is that would be priced in. Just like in racing, when there's a jockey change or a trainer change or a pace scenario situation, it's usually priced in. You're going to be rewarded on taking the Patriots if they have to play Minnesota at home, because Minnesota, the price is going to be adjusted based on the fact that that's happening. And I know that you've talked about being priced in before, and you might be able to speak on it a little bit more, but I think that's probably doesn't really make a difference. If you want to bet the other way, you'll be rewarded for that.
Right, from a value point of view. And it is a concept that means a lot to me. It came up with you and I, JK, when we were talking about the Jaguars matchup last week. It had to do with an injury. Who was it? Maybe Antonio Brown was questionable or something before that game. And you were like, well, is he definitely playing? And I said, I do believe he's playing, but moreover, I feel like injuries and weather typically are the kind of things that you'll see almost an overreaction to with money in the last minute, where it's priced into the point sometimes where it's like overpriced in. People compensate for it too much because they think they're getting an edge. Who knows? Maybe the potential home field advantage in the Super Bowl is that type of situation. Of course, doesn't really matter until they get it done this weekend against the Eagles. As a Giants fan, you know for whom I'll be rooting.
You and the Pear Bear will be wearing purple. I can imagine.
That's right. We'll have a unified household. We'll see if she remembers how into the purple team she was last week.
I love that her gambling is all color related. That's why she likes the one horse because of the red saddle cloth.
I don't know. There are worse. Having seen some of the people on horse racing Twitter, JK, there's worse ways of doing it.
Oh, what's funny is I actually have another quick 30-second story. This morning I called Pete to talk about the show and just to talk about a few things. And, sometimes when you call someone before your conversation starts and they say hello, they're wrapping up another conversation with someone that they're currently in the room with. Well, I hear Pete say, I'll take 20 to win on the 7. And I was like, geez, Pete, it's 7:30. And then I hear Perrin in the background. And I'm like, wait a second, who are you betting with? Are you wagering on European horses with your daughter? And he had to explain it to me. But
I'll explain it with a picture that I'll send out on Twitter. A very cool gift that Perrin received for Christmas was a cash register. But we have decided, and by we, of course, I mean me, that in addition to being a toy cash register, it's also a toy tote machine. So Perrin gets to play girl downstairs. She gets to play teller and sits here. And she asks me what my bet is. And I give her, 20 to win on the 7 in that instance. She has she has cash we can use, but she also has a little credit card, which is obviously a betting card. And she swipes it, writes down the number and the amount on a little Post-it note, hands it to me. And we haven't actually done this watching any races yet, but that's going to be the next step. And this is how I'm educating my child. If you work for child services, please pretend you didn't hear the last 90 seconds of this podcast.
You're just teaching her math. It's all no big deal.
I think she has the potential to be good, and she's shown a real interest in game playing. We haven't gotten to do any critical thinking yet, like strategies and whatnot. But she just loves playing card games and board games, Candyland, etc. And now we've got this situation with the cash register going. I think we've got a little budding horse player. And I don't know. She's avoided video games so far, but maybe that's not a bad next step as well. All right, let's get to some of these questions, JK. I do want to leave a few minutes at the end of the show to quickly go through the Pick 4 at Santa Anita, just to get back in the habit of doing some handicapping. Obviously, business about to pick up in a big way in that regard as we get into more of the Triple Crown preps and just the generally interesting racing that happens later in the winter. So, yeah, there's a bunch of ways I could have tied this in. You mentioned Dan Kovaleski, a guy who was he twice at the final table of the NHC, or did I just make that up?
I believe so. I believe it's twice. Yeah, I think he had a 5th place finish, and then last year he was at the final table. So you mentioned him. That's a way of doing it. And, of course, talking about Las Vegas, DRF Tournaments, of course, we have our own Las Vegas tournament we're running qualifiers for right now, the Horse Player World Series. Both of those Vegas events have optional races. And we received a question over Twitter about what decision-making factors go into choosing optional races. Thought I'd let you start out with this one. Yeah, this is actually a thing that my friend Nick Tamro and I came up with, and it was at the Horse Player World Series is when we did it. One of the most daunting tasks of those two events is it's just like a lot of tracks and a lot of races. And because there's optionals involved, you have an opportunity to play a lot of those different races. And you kind of need to look at all of them. So one of the things that Nick and I came up with was we actually sat in the same room and did it, was we would turn I turned my phone timer on an iPhone with a 1 minute timer, and then I just hit start. And we had 1 minute to look at a race. And we would then color code that race green, yellow, or red. Green meaning we're definitely going to try to find something to bet in this race. Yellow meaning we'll take another look at it. And red meaning, obviously, when we have time, we'll look again. But as of right now, we're going to just skip the race altogether because it doesn't appear there's something we want to wager in that spot, whether it's a heavy favorite or it's just a race that just, has 6 horses in it or whatever it is. And then we would just take all the green races and do our normal process of handicapping. And that was, and you only have 1 minute to evaluate whether or not it's going to be a green, yellow, or red. And if you do that, it gives you a much smaller amount of races to look at up front. And so that's what I've done in the past, and that's what I'll do again. The other thing when it comes to there's a lot of optional races and there's a lot of racing going on is to try to make a schedule. And it's one of the things I do in Excel. I'll put in all the post times. and then I'll sort them in order. So I have like my list will say like Gulfstream 1, Laurel 1, Tampa 1, and then it'll say like Gulfstream 2, Laurel 2, Tampa 3, and then Aqueduct starts. So Aqueduct 1 will show up. So I'm always kind of in line chronologically. And obviously the beautiful management at Gulfstream at Santa Anita currently will create some issues with that, but it still keeps you in the basic premise of where you're going. So that's one of the ways that I would handle the amount of optional races, and one of the ways that I would tackle it. And I recommend people doing that as well.
And that's super easy with a spreadsheet, of course. I may be just stating the obvious here, but it's not like you have to look at what times the races are and put them in the sheet. You just put in Aqueduct 1 through 9 with their post times, and then you put in Fairgrounds 1 through 9, and then Oaklawn 1 through 9, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then you can just sort by time, so it'll happen automatically. JK is absolutely right. The post-drag nonsense, horse player's worst friend, will make you tear your hair out as a result of that nonsense. But it's still better than nothing. Now, how about this, though, JK? Just looking at the question from another angle, what are you looking for? Is it as simple as in an optional race, you're looking for a horse you like at 10-1 or better? I mean, I'm just making that up. I'm not saying that's what you should do, but is that the type of thing you're looking for in an optional race? What makes a race appealing? What makes you put that green light on as opposed to the yellow or the red?
Yeah, I'm like a 7-1 guy. I'm not a 20-1 guy. I don't find those horses. So my threshold is usually 7-1-ish when I'm looking for an optional situation. Or I'll take a 3-1 I know is going to win. And not that I know is going to win, but a 3-1 that I just love. One of the things that I'll do is in that 1 minute when I'm looking is I'll pull up Timeform US. And like you mentioned last week on the show, Eric Moomey had mentioned that, through his stat work that he's done, is that cap horses and big price horses usually come in collapses and or wire to wire winners. And so Timeform is a really easy cheat when you pull up Timeform to see the pace projector, if it projects to favor horses on or near the lead. And if it so happens to be that it projects to favor horses on or near the lead, and I look and it's the 2 horse, and I look at the morning line odds, and I look at the speed figures, and the horse has a huge speed figure edge, he's the 5 on the morning line, then that's probably a yellow or a red for me, and I don't even need to look at it anymore. Conversely, if the horse is 20-1, is shipping in from somewhere else, just got gelded, has a trainer change, cutting back, now I'm looking at a race where there could be a potential betting opportunity, and I'll highlight that one in green and move on. So I'm looking for something, a pace situation, field size, or a horse in which fits into kind of my normal handicapping theories and ideas. A turf horse who's been closing into blue fractions on Timeform. That's another one that would get a green mark or a yellow mark for me to dig deeper into the race.
If you're a note taker, those sort of horses to watch, whether you've put them in your stable mail or you just have strong notes on them, those kind of horses who are going to be decent prices. And then the only other thing I'd add is to look at the question almost in reverse and just find races where you think the favorite is bad. Because even if you don't have a strong opinion on which horse is going to beat that favorite, if you can find a race where the favorite is bad, especially if it's like a full field race where the favorite is bad, that's a pond you can fish for a price in. And you may have to come down to choosing which of the 3 20-1 shots you like to beat that horse, but that's a race that I would want coded green in my spreadsheet to say, okay, look, there is an optional opportunity right here and now.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the other thing to keep in mind is that when you're doing this, I usually will have, about 12 to 15 to 20 green races, and then I'll have about 15 to 20 yellow races. Keep in mind that a lot of your green races are going to become unbettable because this horse that you see as a really big opportunity at 7-8-1 is going to undoubtedly open up at 5-2, and you're not going to bet the race. So it's good to have some extra opportunities. And a lot of your green races are going to turn into mandatory races as well. So you're going to lose those there as well. So, that's the easiest way, in my opinion, to try to do it rather than opening up the form and flipping through every race. The other thing is, look, Fairgrounds draws 7 days early. You can handicap that whole card while you're waiting for the other stuff to come out. So go ahead and knock Fairgrounds out as soon as it comes out. And then it's just one less thing for you to have to look at.
That's excellent advice. Just let me know, in an ideal world, let's say you had a situation where you had eight optional races throughout the course of the day on your spreadsheet to feel confident that you're going to be able to get those 8 optional plays. How many races are going to be highlighted green that you're going to winnow down to those 8 plays?
I mean, I'd say like 15 on the day, because here's the thing. Good. Like I said, it's not only the 6-1 that you like that gets bet down to 5-2. There's also the 20-1 that you like that ends up being 8-1, and you're like, oh, geez. I mean, I liked them at 20-1, but 8-1. I don't know if I want to waste one of my plays here. So you'll pass on those a lot as well. So. And there's also the ones that are 5-1 that you like, and you're like, it's 5-1, but then he creeps up to 10-1. Then it's a horse that you got to play. So you just want to have a good guide. You're still going to have to make decisions on the fly, but you want to give yourself at least an outline of where you're going to be. I don't understand how people just show up, grab the form, and roll their way through it on the day. It's just too tough for me.
It's tough. I mean, mental state wise, Paul Sherman's great line, you can prepare your way to a good mental state. And I think that's true in a chaotic environment like the Horse Player World Series. The more of a roadmap you can have, the better. And yeah, you'll probably have to deviate a little bit from that roadmap, and that's okay. That's not defeat, but you want to have as much stuff mapped out as possible just to diminish the amount of noise that's going to be jamming up your signals. You can play in theaters to qualify for the Horse Player World Series right now over at tournaments.drf.com. And then, of course, we got big news with the World Championship of Handicapping. We're really getting down to it. Just 2 weekends more of qualifying. The tournament will be taking place Super Bowl weekend, so that's the 3rd and the 4th. Just announced, Jonathan, that there's going to be a special last chance qualifier on the Friday before, the day before the WCH starts. There's going to be a $225 all-in qualifier on the site. That'll be the lowest price point at which one could win in directly. And you know what? The ratio, still not bad. 1 in 26 will win their $5,000 buy-ins. More fun stuff about that tournament. We're not going to broadcast the whole thing live, but the show that day sounds like we've gotten special dispensation from producer Craig to have the show on in the afternoon. So we'll do a live video stream that will coincide with the beginning of that tournament. It'll give us an opportunity to sort of pregame a bit about the WCH, talking strategy, talking about some of the races that are going to be in it. Should be a lot of fun. This new path to qualification, in addition to the existing grade ones where you can put up 580 and 1 in 10 will win their $5,000 seat. And of course, you can win into those through feeders, the most common one of which is the round 1 contest, where you put up 95, 1 in 7 win those 580 entries. There will be several more grade 1s for the WCH, one this Saturday, and I think we're going to double barrel it next week. And then if the interest remains high, which I assume it will, we're going to be able to, we might even run some on the weekdays that final week. So tournaments.drf.com. And we had a question, JK, from a friend come in, and I don't want to name names when we're sort of violently disagreeing with people that we like, but somebody was a little concerned about the purse of the WCH. I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, I mean, it's $1 million prize if 200 people participate, and so I guess that someone misunderstood that or had the impression or whatever that it was a guaranteed thing. There's not a lot of contests that guarantee. If you think of what our 3 or 4 biggest contests are, it's based on participation. How many people are playing in it, especially in a takeout-free event. Guaranteeing to me doesn't make a ton of sense. So, the NHC is not a guaranteed thing. It's based on participation. The Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge is not a guaranteed thing. It's based on participation. The Horse Player World Series, there really isn't too many guarantees. And so, especially with a new tournament, a new contest, a new concept, and doing something like that, I think it's completely understandable and acceptable to be able to not so much go out on a limb and guarantee it. Now, I'm of the belief, when you've mentioned it before, I'm one of those people that thinks that there's going to be 200 people that play it. I think that people will sign up, and I know that we opened it up yesterday to allow people to buy their seat. I think that we'll get to the 200, and if not, we'll get pretty darn close. So to me, it's just it's not a big deal. It's a new situation, and let's see how it unfolds.
I think that's well put. Not too much to add. I mean, in the marketing, we have said 1 million no takeout. Again, that's because it's limited to 200, and that's what it'll be if 200 show up. As you said, there's a good chance. I don't know about a good chance. It's a reasonable chance it's going to happen. I mean, this is the best opportunity in the history of online contests, but it's new, so it's hard to know how many players are going to come for it. But even right now, I think we've qualified about 60, probably about 10 more. So 70 qualifiers. To me, that's a terrific amount of money, and you're already at a significant amount. I'd be shocked, speechless, if 50 didn't show up, and I think that number will be closer to 100. And who knows, if we catch a little bit of momentum, hopefully it'll be the whole mill. It's an amazing opportunity for players, and just hoping to see a lot of names. I will continue to keep people updated where possible with the number of entries that have been purchased and people who have qualified, so folks can have an idea of exactly what they're playing for. An email just went out yesterday with the prize structure, and it's looking like a pretty cool tournament. And I'm excited to get a chance to follow that along with all the other big tournament action that we have coming down the pike in the form of the Pegasus and everything else going on. So should be a fun few weeks to be a guy who covers tournaments.
Absolutely, yeah. No, it's upon us. 3 big ones in a row, and should be fun. A lot of I guess all 3 events are going to create new 6-figure tournament winners, so that'll be fun. Yeah,
that's really cool. I didn't even thought about that, but that's a great way of looking at it. One other quick programming note. I am on another podcast this week. For those of you who don't get enough of me and my dulcet tones on the DRF Players podcast, you can check out the Gambling with an Edge podcast. Richard Munchkin and Bob Dancer host. No, those are not their real names, but Gambling with an Edge is a great show all about advantage play of all kinds. They've had people from poker, blackjack, casino gambling, wherever, credit card promotions, anywhere where you can gain an edge, they are interested in. And I was flattered that they wanted to talk to Mike Maloney about betting with an edge. And we had a really fun conversation the other day where it took a little bit of a different turn than a lot of the other promotional conversations about the book. We actually get a little bit into the negative side of being a horse player and some of the things that we deal with. But it's always interesting to hear Mike opine about the key issues of the game. And I recommend folks check it out, the Gambling with an Edge podcast. Have you ever listened to those guys, JK?
I never have, but I'm glad you said that wasn't their real names, because I was going to be like, geez, what's the odds of those 2 guys hooking up and doing a show together?
Bob Dancer is a dancer, and he's a video poker guy. He's terrific on the show. He teaches like video poker classes and things out in Vegas too, showing people how to work the angles. Richard Munchkin has had a career of advantage play, also works in television, but I first came to know about him from a terrific book called Gambling Wizards, which was all interviews with professional bettors, which was one of the influences for 6 Secrets of Successful Bettors that Frank Scattoni and I worked on years ago. So I've always owed that professional debt to Richard, and he's an interesting guy, and the show is very cool.
I have to ask, I know we're up against the time. He's a winning video poker player?
Bob is, yeah. Video poker, you do a whole show on this. But basically, like, there's rules with those machines where I don't know enough about this to be talking about it, so I'll probably get something wrong. But basically, like, every machine has a pay table that shows you, like, what's been paid out and what needs to be paid out by a certain time. So if you play video poker judiciously, and it's more complicated than what I'm making it sound like, but you can find opportunities where you're going to have an overlay by playing the right machines. And of course, you also have to do this surreptitiously, because advantage players in casinos, they they don't really mix. They don't really like them. So you gotta worry about that too. But it's there is a way to get an edge doing it. Check out the show. You'd enjoy. They've had some really great guests, and the guys do a terrific job. And I think you'll definitely get a kick out of it. Some topic flashed across my mind that I wanted to mention, but it's out of my head, and we're almost out of time. So if we're going to talk about any racing, I think we should just get to it, JK. And we decided we're just going to look at this late pick 4 at Santa Anita on Saturday. What did you come up with in the first leg here?
Yeah, it's a starter optional. I guess the 3 outside horses are horses that you would want to use. If I'm making a selection here, I would pick the 6, Tenabud. First time Bill Morey. Interesting. The horse was with Brad Cox. The horse wasn't claimed, but qualifies for the conditions and is sent out west. Gulfstream Fairgrounds has typically been a place, and I haven't been doing fairgrounds work, so don't hold me to this. But when it rains, the inside is where you want to be. It's never a bad place to be on the inside at fairgrounds, but I think that when the weather comes, it becomes even better. And this horse was 2 or 3 wide all the way around there, was bumped at the break a little bit. I think this horse could improve with the new connections. Could be tough here. Ran that 60 buyer as a 2-year-old. Yeah, it was only 30 days before he turned 3, so that's not really the strong angle that it can be at times. However, 60 days into his 60 days out of that one, 30 days into his new race, you'd expect that he could improve a little bit off of that. So the 6 Tenabud for me, I'd use the 5 and the 7 if you have some stronger opinions elsewhere.
Did you give Empress of Love any shot on the inside, getting back on the dirt for Gary Sherlock? Time form looked pretty strong in terms of time form stuff, and the pace projector had clear.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that horse definitely can get a part, with being at some dropping in class, but obviously ran for a tag, I guess, in one of those optional races, ran for a tag, so, qualifies for the condition. Definitely one that could be considered. It hasn't really been bet in the last few starts, but was probably in over his head. So 108-1 last time on the turf, 50-1 before that. Obviously must not be blazing the trails in the mornings, but I think the 3 outside horses are have an advantage in the spot.
Fair enough. All right, let's move on to the 7th race. And this one is our feature, the Las Vegas Grade 3, going down the hill. And we have Bendable, who you would think would take nicely to the grass, giving it a whirl here. Yeah,
Las Vegas, I think, is it's like a road in L.A. I don't want to make our L.A. people mad at us.
Did I do another Alcibiades? Did I do it again?
So. Yeah, I think so. But
I don't think the LA people are as fanatical as the Lexingtonians, 17 of whom corrected me within 30 minutes. We'll see.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm going to go with our guy, Luch Racing here. The 7, Proper Discretion, gets Flavian Pratt. The horse is entered in the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint. Probably an ambitious spot with 75-1 that day. But does have one of my favorite angles in racing, which is a speed and fade going 2 turns on the grass and then cutting back. You have to dig a little bit into the PPs to see that race at Saratoga, where Thundering Sky, On Leave, and Bar of Gold quality group were happened to best this horse. But Phil D'Amato can win some races down the hill. This horse will be a little bit of a stranger danger. Hopefully we'll be able to keep some of the 10-1. I don't imagine we'll keep all of it. But Proper Discretion is one that I would definitely use in this spot. Instant Reflex is interesting with the wind down the hill. Beau Recall on the cutback. I usually don't like the 1 1/4, 1 1/8 cutbacks down the hill, but definitely one to respect. Proper Discretion for me.
You against Bendable?
No, I'm not against. I just, time purposes, I didn't throw out every horse in the race. No, Bendable's definitely usable. Mike Smith and is well bred and is a little bit of not a class drop, but has run well in some spots on the dirt. It's always weird for me though. It's like Mandela's one of those guys that he doesn't usually miss where his horses are spotted. And the fact that this horse has been dirt with plenty of opportunities to turf, and hasn't found her way there yet, it's a little bit interesting. And as a 5-year-old, she's never been on the turf. So why all of a sudden?
All right. We could debate it, but it's not worth it because it's not that interesting, and we have like 3 minutes to do 3 more races. But I will point out for all you horsemen out there, Proof once again with his pick of proper discretion. You buy the man a couple of drinks, he's going to pick your horses for at least a month. So just keep that in mind before making any alcohol purchasing decisions for Mr. Kinchin. Let's move on to the 8th race, JK.
Yeah, I like the 4 Rocky Show here. It's Santa Anita. I think if you can pay attention to the races that are 5 furlongs and 5.5, they really do play to speed. And to me, the speed in this spot is Rocky Show. Has some nice time form figures. Was sprinting going 5. Got a little bit tired. Hopefully won't have to move as fast early in this spot. 4-1 on the morning line for some connections. I would think that you could probably keep a little bit of that 4-1. So Rocky Show for me. Obviously the 2 has some speed as well with Evan Roman, who's likely to receive an Eclipse Award next Thursday night. Probably one that you would want to consider as well. But for me, I think you could probably get away with just the 2 and the 4 in this race. I would lean on the 4.
Okay, I like it. I buy that. I have nothing to add. And then we are down the hill once again for the nightcap. How are we gonna make some money here, JK?
Yeah, I like Conquest Tsunami. If you look at Time Form US, the race in the Arctic, I believe, if I'm not lying, just pulling it up. Yeah, 2 back had a Time Form pace of 166, 158 coated red on soft going. The horse can really run early. The switch from Cassie to Peter Miller, it feels as if Gary Barber and had the idea that this horse might excel down the hill. So let's get it out west and get it with our trainer that we have out here in Peter Miller. Gets Tyler Bays, who can definitely get the job done down the hill. And so I'm going to look for this horse to run well, and that's Conquest Tsunami.
I like
is the 6 horse.
I like that idea. I might caution to try to have something with a little bit of finish to go with for your horizontals. Potentially, just because I can see the scenario of the 6 blowing the doors off, or I could see something silly happening and maybe something that can finish. I don't know, Harbor Master. What do you think?
Yeah, Harbor Master, I think is one that we played last time in the 2-turn race for Cassidy, who was closing into a slow pace. The horse has tried going down the hill before and didn't do that well, but then got a really long layoff after that. So assuming maybe that horse wasn't right then, does get Kent DeSormo, who we've talked about millions of times on this show, is one of the best riders on the turf that you can get, if not ever. And I think that another interesting horse in here would be Ronald R. for Simon Callahan. First time in the United States, first time Lasix, is drawn outside, down the hill. Those outside post positions are where you want to be. Gets Flavian Pratt and definitely could excel first time Lasix, and is also cutting back a little bit. Should have a nice turn of foot being over in Europe.
All right, we are out of time for this edition of the DRF Players Podcast. I want to thank Jonathan Kinchin. I want to thank Willie Nile for providing our theme song. More of his music at willienile.com. I want to thank Travis Stone for providing his golden throat to the intro. Most of all, I want to thank all of you for listening, especially those of you who asked questions. We will be back on Tuesday. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatow. May you win all your photos.